want to welcome everyone to the School Transportation Nation podcast, episode 45. I am Tony Corpin, publisher of School Transportation News. This episode is brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software, and our friends at Zonar, a leader in smart fleet management.
And I'm Ryan Gray, editor-in-chief of School Transportation News. We've got two great guests for you on tap today. Zonar Chief Operating Officer Michael Gould, who will be appearing next week at our STN EXPO Virtual conference, as will be Joshua Hinerman, Transportation Supervisor for Robertson County Schools in Tennessee.
Wonderful, Ryan. Well, you know what? We got a great lineup for STN EXPO Virtual. I'm really excited. If you haven't signed up yet, make sure and go to stnexpovirtual.com. We have just a blockbuster cast of speakers, keynotes. You can learn more there. Lots of COVID-related things. And we are talking funding. Joe Biden last week came out with some comments, a bunch of plans. What does that look like, Ryan? A lot of funding that he was, I think, thinking for schools. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. He announced his American Rescue Plan last Thursday evening. And boy, when you talk about funding, this is a plan. It still has to go through Congress. But remember, the Democrats now have control, albeit narrowly, of both the House and Senate. But we'll see what these discussions start to bring forward, likely in the next week or so, if not immediately. But yes, in terms of funding, overall, $1.9 trillion, so larger than certainly the last stimulus, approaching that level of the CARES Act, but much more money for public schools. So what President Biden, who takes Oval Office basically when the podcast is coming out, he said that the previous stimulus that was passed by former President Donald Trump at the end of the year was a down payment. It was a step in the right direction, but not enough, especially to get schools safely to reopen. Now, with this big package that he's proposing, he's offering $170 billion.
How much, Ryan? Billion?
170 billion with a B.
I wanted to hear that, right? That's a lot.
Yeah. So basically, that's taking the CARES Act 1.0 from last March and CARES Act 2.0, as our buddy Joshua Hinerman calls it, from the end of December. And that's, combining those two, and it does not meet all the money that Biden wants to spend on K through 12 schools. Now, when it comes to safely reopening schools, 130 billion is going toward that. So right there, that alone too is just as much money as was allocated the past two stimulus. Going forward, what does this mean? Now, it was interesting in reading the plan. President Biden, he does mention school buses in here and specifically using some of this $130 billion to reopen schools safely for adequate spacing on school buses. What exactly that means, I think that, certainly we have our brain trust in the industry is going to be kind of crunching those numbers and seeing what they can do again if this does come to fruition. But also, too, he mentions ventilation systems. Ventilation systems currently is acceptable use of funds under the current stimuluses that are out there, stimuli, I guess. So that's going to be going forward. I mentioned last podcast, the U.S. Department of Education did get back to me and confirmed that school districts can use this stimulus money for school bus ventilation systems, much better than, opening windows and whatnot. So, there's $5 billion included in there that's going to go to governors that they can address getting schools, maybe some of the lowest income. And granted, all this stimulus money really targets low income first. I want to say that. But, there's additional $5 billion that's going to be at the discretion of governors. It's a really big investment. So it will be interesting to see what Congress does with this. And of course, with that too, it includes $1,400 in direct payments to Americans, not the $2,000 that was bandied about. But some of the talk that I've seen on social media is, well, they took the $600 that was just approved at the end of the year, and to make that $2,000, they're giving Americans another $1,400. There's childcare credits that are increasing, tax credits that are increasing, federal mandated leave if you have COVID or have to care for people who have COVID. There's a lot of aid in here, and we'll just see how it shakes out.
Yeah, right. I think one thing that really jumped out, and again, we brought it up last episode in the podcast, is the $15 minimum wage. If you are not planning to bring your school bus drivers up to a $15 minimum wage, you might just be forced to. It sounds like an ambitious plan, but national minimum wage, we talked about it before. This might become a reality for school transportation departments, and labor being one of our biggest line items. It might just grow in terms of the overall expense in terms of labor and budgeting. So definitely a big thing that I took away from incoming President Biden's speech. Ryan, going green has been a big thing as well. And we've got our Green Bus Summit coming up in April 20th through the 22nd. You can learn more at greenbussummit.com. President Biden had outlined originally in his plan, moving the school buses in the United States, 500,000 to electric. That seems a little ambitious, but hey, you know what? If we can get the funding for it, I'm sure there's a will, there's a way. You want to give us a rundown on kind of what's going on there?
Yeah, well, we talked about this a bit last week, and talking to some of the manufacturers, some of them think that all of the manufacturers should be able to meet whatever demand there is. Now, yes, again, it comes back down to funding. There was no money, I should note, for electric school buses in this plan. This was really, COVID related. Now, it did include the $15 minimum wage, which has been a Democrat talking point for many years now. And that's something that we see here in California, and that's coming around the bend. But when it comes to green buses, we have a lot of propane out there right now already. And the propane folks, of course, are saying that this is not a bridge fuel. This is something that's going to be able to be used going forward. So, when it really comes down to, we're in this industry of local control. What makes the most sense for one district might not make the most sense for the district right next door. So it's going to definitely continue to be an environment where people are going to have choices. There's a lot of people that are going to want to stick with diesel. We know that we're moving away from diesel, but diesel is almost as clean as the alternative fuels out there. There's also renewable diesel now. There's renewable propane, renewable CNG. So I'm taking out of this whole conversation that, yes, I think long term, we could eventually see everything electric. It's going to be decades and decades and decades and decades from now. I really think that before we'd see something like that, we're going to still continue to see propane and clean diesel continue to play big roles in this industry.
Ryan, something that happened a few weeks ago is actually, if you guys watch Jim Cramer, Mad Money on CNBC, CEO Mark Bedard at Lion Electric was interviewed. They are going public through Northern Genesis Alliance, and that has got Wall Street really cooking on the idea of school buses going electric, as well as some of the other vehicles, trucking that they make. But it has gone mainstream. A few of the other companies, obviously like Bluebird, that are out there, they're seeing a lot of action around this. It's very interesting to watch this unfold in kind of the Wall Street environment, that school bus is kind of taking a center stage as President Biden kind of looks towards this plan for electrification. So very interesting stuff.
Yeah, when we were been talking about last year, the S&P Global and their closing year-end analysis and guidance, they were talking about that 2021 was going to be a big year for M&A, mergers and acquisitions. And we've seen that with the Lion deal that actually was announced in the fall. And then most recently, Proterra. So they're the ones that provide the electric power, the charging and energy management solutions for the Thomas Built buses, Julie, their C2 electric model. They're being acquired by ArcLight Clean Transition Corporation, with, of course, the end result being, if it goes through, to be a public company as well. So who's next? It certainly seems that this is the direction that things are going.
Yeah, Ryan, no one could have anticipated the challenges we would have faced in 2020. And thanks to COVID-19, we're still kind of in the thick of it. And we're already seeing 2021 new challenges of its own. There's a plan, I'm not sure. Some people have it, some people don't. This year, TransFinder wants to help you navigate that plan in 2021. And navigate is an acronym that outlines how to plan for the future and get the peace of mind you want and your colleagues demand. The N in navigate stands for negotiate. To negotiate the rough terrain ahead, you need the right tools like Route Finder Plus, Wayfinder, and Stop Finder. The navigate acronym ends E, evaluate. It's not enough to have a plan. It's crucial to evaluate it often to make sure the plan is working as intended and determine if you have the right tools to get the job done. To find out what's between N and E, be sure to attend STN EXPO Virtual on Tuesday, January 26th to hear TransFinder President and CEO Antonio Civitella discuss how to navigate 2021, planning for the unplanned. That's at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. Email marketing@transfinder.com to learn more or check out stnexpovirtual.com. We've got two amazing guests coming up. Stay tuned. Well, I want to welcome Michael Gould, Zonar COO, to the podcast. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Tony. It's great to be here, part of the crew.
Hey, appreciate you. Well, we got some exciting stuff coming up here at the end of January, and Mike is going to be our keynote up at the STN EXPO Virtual, and Mike's going to be talking about the 3 key opportunities for 2021. Mike, you want to kind of just give us a big picture rundown? How did you come up with this concept, and what do you have in store for our audience?
Hey, well, thanks, Tony. And again, thanks for having us, by the way. Zonar, we always look forward to working with you guys on these expos. And I think this is your second virtual version. So we're proud to be part of that, Tony. So a great job as you've kind of adopted to the new COVID realities.
Thank you.
But yeah, so, my background is deep in tech consulting, right? So I've spent a lot of time at both HP and Oracle prior to working at Zonar, working in and around technology projects. And so I thought I'd focus my talk on general technology and the impacts that technology has on your business. So particularly important around COVID and post-COVID world that we live in. Just kind of what are we looking for? Things around, from student safety, sanitation type topics, as well as, fleet operations, preventive maintenance, topics like that are really now becoming kind of mainstream and core technology benefits that we need to be, leveraging across our fleet operations. The second part is really about how to get buy-in for these projects. And it's so interesting. There's a lot of cool business models out there that make some of these projects literally self-funding. So I'll give a little bit of detail about some of the partnerships we have on how we manage a self-funded project, working on the business case for these programs, and again, how we can make it a little bit easier to digest some of the upfront costs when you endeavor to jump into some of these technology projects. And then third, it's really about critical success factors. I've seen a lot of projects over the years and kind of trying to impart a little bit of, I'll say, wisdom on what works and what doesn't and what to be looking out for. And so there's really big three, and I'll kind of save that for the discussion, but really focusing on how to just ensure that you're going to have a successful outcome.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, and Zonar is really known for, providing its customers kind of that operational efficiency, effectiveness, trying to help reduce costs. What do you have in store for us in terms of maybe Zonar's product roadmap? What's on tap for 2021? Any scoops, any special secrets you can give to me just between us?
Well, yeah, just between us. Well, it's a busy time. It's super interesting first, too. 2020, we're glad it's over in a lot of ways. And I got to say, it hit us from, how we were responding to our customers. We have a lot of kind of technology on the shelf, kind of backed up, ready to go kind of thing. I guess if there's a benefit from 2020 is that, now we're going to get to see this stuff getting implemented in a more active way in 2021. And so we're doing a ton of work across the company. We're starting with our core platform, and it's really providing more insights, more data points, literally, to our customers so that they can drive better insights. insights. So our core platform's seen a lot of enhancements. And then as we work down through our applications, there's a lot going on with enhancing functionality, but also some new applications, new parent apps, for example. We've got that integrated with our student tracking technologies, which is really cool. We've done a lot of work with driver training, from kind of route guidance to coaching. So we've got some dual camera technology that's coming out this year. It's really cool. A lot of help with the fleet operations themselves. So kind of fleet maintenance, some predictive and using some machine learning technologies to help manage your fleet better. So that's all coming out. And actually, a lot of it's already been released. It's really cool. We've got some really cool partnerships on the docket as well. Development relationship with Bike Curve. We're doing some joint application development there with them. Great partnership and a business model partnership with Bus Patrol. Some swing arm technology and camera technology that they have. And a super interesting business model, which I'll talk about a little bit in my discussion at the Expo. Also, our OEM partnerships. Gosh, I'm just, I feel like there's a lot here as I kind of talk out loud with you here, how much we got going on, but we're really excited about it.
Yeah, no, and Zonar is celebrating a very special anniversary, I believe, this year. It's your 20th year in business. Is that right?
20 years. It's been a great ride for the crew and for Zonar. We're really proud of it. As you know, Tony, Zonar is also part of Continental. So we're a wholly owned subsidiary now of Continental AG. And it just happens to be their 150th anniversary, actually, as well. So that's kind of cool. And we're going to be celebrating our 20th anniversary throughout the year. And again, we're really proud of that.
Yeah, well, this will be a great opportunity for attendees to come to STN EXPO Virtual and talk to your team about all the new products, all the great things you have on the roadmap that, maybe they're a Zonar customer with the EVer product and they're not using anything else that you have in your arsenal. And you can kind of share with them a much bigger kind of opportunity for them to gain efficiencies with all the new things you have coming in the pipeline. So that's really, really exciting. And just to shift gears a lot, tech's great, but how do you afford it, right? I think their budgets are strapped. And it's my understanding you guys have some different resources that you can offer customers and new customers to access this technology. Can you share a little bit about maybe some of the things you have to provide customers the opportunity to access this technology?
Yeah, sure. And that's again, going to be a part of my discussion as well, the Expo keynote. But, there's a couple that come to mind right off the bat. First is, there's always a cost avoidance angle, and that's more of around the fleet operations and maintenance. And so that's kind of traditional, right? And a lot of people know about those kind of techniques to kind of look at the business case for a particular project or program. But there's also some really interesting work that we're doing around leveraging grants, for example, right? So a lot of the technology we have actually has CARES Act applicability and other grants, federal and local, state and local grant work that can be done. And so we work with some third parties that help us through the grant application process or help our customers through the grant application process, which is really neat. And then also, I mentioned Bus Patrol, but they have a really interesting and very innovative business model where they actually have a self-funding through civil violations of running the stop signs and actually sharing revenue with both the school district and also helping pay for the technology itself. So some really interesting ways to fund those projects.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, definitely stop arm violation technology along with stop arm technology. That combination is definitely newer and, some states allow it, some states don't. Right. But we see definitely more of a progression and movement towards that because it really, it touches on safety, and safety is a major factor. Zonar has also been a big proponent of safety and protecting students. Are there any other big kind of safety items that you see in 2021 that could be of value for our listeners to consider to look at when they're looking at Zonar as a solution provider?
Yeah, well, a couple things come to mind. First and foremost, with regard to COVID-related activities, and we have some really great sanitation solutions, right? Verified sanitation solutions that help ensure that the bus is clean, right? And that the kids are getting taken care of. The other thing that comes to mind is the work we're doing with our parent application and student tracking. Our development team's done a great job of connecting the worlds, if you will, of communication and keeping people informed from both the fleet operator as well as the parent as to where those kids are, when they get on, when they get off the bus. So those are some relevant kind of real-time activities that we're doing.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank Mike for joining us on the podcast today, and I want to invite all of you to come to STN EXPO Virtual, January 25th through the 27th. Go check out stnexpovirtual.com. We just updated the schedule, new speakers, new topics. Check out the website. You'll get lots of great information. Next up, I have Ryan Gray with Joshua Hinerman. Looking forward to that conversation.
We're now joined by Joshua Hinerman, Transportation Supervisor for Robertson County Schools north of Nashville, Tennessee. Joshua, thank you so much for joining the School Transportation Nation.
Thank you for having me today, Ryan.
Well, everybody top of mind, of course, it continues to be COVID-19, and the virus really hit home for you, didn't it, this past year?
It did. I ended up contracting COVID-19 and missed almost a month's worth of work. So it certainly took its toll on me. I'm very sympathetic to those that are enduring its symptoms and its wrath. And I'm very sad for the ones that have actually lost their life. We've lost a bus driver. I've lost a good friend of mine over in Sumner County. The transportation supervisor there passed away from COVID. And we lost one of our bus monitors. So it's hit home. It's been very personal.
Definitely. You mentioned Clint Barnes. We wrote about him last September, passing away from COVID. He was, of course, a past president of Tennessee Association for People Transportation. And he was, of course, as you said, the transportation supervisor for there at Sumner County Schools. Well, you said it made a believer out of you. So when it comes to the vaccine, that's the next thing everyone's talking about. Any conversations that you're having with your superintendent and your school attorneys on what you may or may not require in terms of your school bus drivers and your transportation staff to get that vaccine once it's available?
Well, I think the question everybody asks is, can we mandate our employees to take the vaccine? And our legal representation has certainly indicated that we cannot do that. I can say that the Department of Education and the governor of the state of Tennessee, they have moved us up the priority after you take care of those that are 75 years and older and have the higher likelihood of contracting the disease. I know there are drivers here and attendants in my own department that would like to have the vaccine, but I feel like at this point we probably are not going to mandate it, but it certainly will be available. What that looks like and how we administer, that'll have to really come down from the health department.
Understood. So let's go back a couple months with the start of the school year. Where was Robertson County in this whole timeline? What did you have to deal with COVID? Did you go immediately back to school, all kids in classes? Was there hybrid? How did that affect transportation?
So Robertson County, we serve about 11,500 students. So back in August, when we started this conversation after ending the school year so abruptly last year, we ended in March, we knew we wouldn't be going back with every student in the county being in person. So we offered the option to students to sign up to do a virtual, what we call virtual experience. And we had quite a few students take that option. Transportation, of course, is not provided for those students. We certainly wanted to make feeding those students possible. So we made sure that our kitchens, we had a few schools that were set up to provide meals. So if those students or their families wanted to come to get food, the ones that were doing the virtual experience, they could do that. What I would say then for the rest of the students, we did the 5 days a week. We did a survey of all of our parents. What did they want? We asked our educators what they wanted as well. And there was a huge majority of parents that wanted their kids to be in school. And so that's what we did. And we were pretty successful at that until we got closer to the Thanksgiving break. At that point, we started seeing a significant uptick. And right prior to the Christmas break, we had sent 1,000 students home each week, the 2 weeks prior to Christmas break. And at that point, we knew we were going to have to change our educational delivery method. And now we are actually doing, when we came back from the Christmas break, we went with the hybrid model. So we have students by last name, A through L. They go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We We deep clean the buildings, but that's the day that we also offer what I call RTI, or enrichment services. So students that need additional educational services, they just stand outside at the end of their driveways. They can catch the buses because all of our buses are going to run their entire routes every day. And then the other 2 days, we do the other set of students. So that's the method that we elected to do for the second half of the year. And so far, it's working out much better, because I can say as a transportation supervisor this year versus previous years, when you get hey, we had a student on your bus that had COVID, and now we're doing seating charts, and we're having to contact trace, and then we're sending 15, 20 kids home from one bus. It gets pretty overwhelming when you spend most of your day trying to figure out who sat next to who.
Well, and I understand that you have some wish list items that may help with that if you can get the budget money for it. Student tracking, mobile apps, live video streaming. A lot of folks we're talking to are using those technologies to help with contact tracing. Is that along the lines of what you're looking to do?
Yes. If we were able to track which students actually board the bus, having the seating charts are wonderful. For some of our routes in town where we knew at the very beginning we have some routes that it's not possible to social distance. So from the very beginning, we had to say, how are we going to transport students to school and back home and mitigate their exposure to COVID and ours as well? So, we went away from boys sitting with boys and girls with girls to that family arrangement. The first kids on the bus go all the way to the back, with the last ones that get on sit up front. We've not sat any students in the first 2 seats on both sides of the bus to protect our drivers. We've required the use of masks on the bus this year, which has been a challenge because not everybody believes that they should be made to wear them. But we just said this is non-negotiable. If you ride the bus, you have to do that because this is the one environment we cannot social distance. But I do believe having the ability to tap into a live stream and watch the video on the bus, the administrators then could help with that process. Instead of it all being on transportation, they could go right into the bus that's in question. Oh, there's Johnny. These are the 4 students that were within that proximity. We can go on and call their parents and they're sent home instead of us having to go pull a hard drive and do it so manually. And then being able to track students would be a wonderful contribution too. But again, that's going to require some funding that I'm hoping that we can tap into from the CARES Act funding that just came down.
Okay. Well, and you mentioned the CARES Act, which actually was the first stimulus that was passed into law last March. And you did get some of that money in transportation to initially pay for cleaning supplies and PPE, correct?
We did face masks because we really had an emphasis. Every student was going to wear a mask on the bus, and we ordered a lot of masks. We wanted sprayers. We needed some way to spray all the buses down and not have all the buses come to us. And so what we did is we purchased hand sprayers. We got some Virex solution that you spray down in a mist all over the seats at the end of each run, which has been a little bit more labor intensive, but it has paid off because I can say from transportation, we didn't have anybody for the first half of the year. We didn't have to send any drivers home, any bus attendants. None of us contracted COVID-19, which I believe is because we were so diligent in cleaning the buses so often and enforcing the use of masks every day.
And one of the big conversations has turned to school bus ventilation. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, of course, for months and months have been talking about needing ventilation on school buses. And it really started with, the old-fashioned roll down the windows. That is not very tenable, not a long-term solution, especially with us here in the winter months. So a lot of focus has turned to school bus ventilation systems, and there's several on the market now. Is that anything that Robertson County is looking at? Again, granted, you have the funds.
Well, it's certainly something I'm going to petition the superintendent to make use. I know that he is committed. I heard at the last board meeting that we were going to receive around $6.5 million as a school system. And he said he was going to earmark a lot of that money for facility updates. And I know that the HVAC systems will be one of the primary focus areas. And I'm hopeful that the school bus ventilation will be included in that program, in those updates.
Now, is that $6.5 million coming from the most recent stimulus that was passed at the end of the year?
Yes, I call it the CARES Act 2.0. It was much more robust than the first one. I believe we just received a little over like 1.6 million in the first round. So this is a huge, huge increase from what we got the first time around.
Definitely. And then, of course, there is a plan that was unhatched last week by President Joe Biden, who is now taken the Oval Office. So this has to still go through Congress, but huge investment, really ramping up for K through 12 education, really actually focusing more on K through 8, really, but $130 billion, which is basically CARES Act 1.0 and 2.0 combined. So potentially a lot more money for you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I'm grateful that the incoming president has that focus on education, K-12. I can say that our previous education secretary, I don't know that she had the best interest of students at heart. So he's going to really work hard to try to narrow that gap and to narrow the educational loss that our students have experienced. I mean, imagine we closed schools in March of last year and we did not go back into school until the middle of August. I mean, that's quite a bit of educational loss, the learning that we've encountered for our students. And I don't know how you fully get all that back without offering more education, like after school programs, summer school programs, but we need funding to do that. Those programs aren't free, but I believe they are very much necessary for the success or the educational success of our children.
Absolutely. And with those closures of schools, we didn't just have the children not going, but we had a lot of drivers. Now, Robertson County, you said, was very lucky that you were able to, for the most part, start up the school year business as usual, I guess I'll say. But there were still many challenges that you continue to have with training the drivers. Some of these drivers might not have been behind the wheel. Certainly across the country in different school districts, there have been school bus drivers that just now, after the layoff starting last March, are getting behind the wheel. How important is virtual training of drivers? What is Robertson County doing in that realm?
Well, I believe that COVID, if there are any positive aspects that have come out of having the COVID-19 pandemic, I would say one of them is that we have learned, I would even say we have been forced to embrace the use of technology. Technology makes it possible to do things that we otherwise would not be able to do. And for us, we knew that we were not going to be able to come back to school business as normal, having our large staff meetings that we would normally do during the month of July in person. We knew that wasn't possible. So we made use of the Infinity Eye platform. We had purchased that last year, and we were able to do a lot of recordings, individual personalized recordings. We could have our drivers, you send it out to the drivers. They log into their account. They can do that on their cell phone. They can do that sitting on the couch at home. Or, as you know, we have an older population driving our school buses still. And so there are some that would still elect to come in here. And so we were grateful that we're able to install a small computer lab here right in the transportation department. And so we can have 6 to 7 people come in at a time. They're in these little cubicles, and we can still work with them, practice social distancing, and they're getting the skill sets and the knowledge that's necessary to help them be successful and to serve our students. I can say that the state has also embraced the use of this Infinity Eye platform statewide so that we no longer have to have our S endorsement classes in person, but rather we can assign a month to the drivers and they can all go online, do all 4 hours worth of their annual training right there. And when it's through, I get an email that says, Ryan's completed his requirement, and print your certificate off and have it right here in my office. And you never even have to come in the office to do that. So I'm a big fan of the technology. I'm grateful that we were able to do this year, even though it's been a little bit of a battle with some of our veteran bus drivers and bus attendants because technology is not their favorite thing. One way we helped them with that was to say, utilize your children and grandchildren. I can promise you they can get you in and out of that program. And it's been wonderful to hear the positive feedback from some of those drivers as they come in. I was sitting on the couch doing that training. It was so nice to be able to watch TV and drink coffee, and I didn't even have to get all dressed up, just sit there in my pajamas. So I'm really grateful that we're able to do that, to offer another avenue to learn. Our team members have to be able to receive that necessary education to be successful, or professional development. It's needed.
And Joshua, you will be talking on this subject at our upcoming STN EXPO Virtual next week. January 26th, joining Leon Langley, the Assistant Director of Transportation for Montgomery County Public Schools in Maryland, and Jeremy Wordle, the Director of Transportation at Canyons School District in Utah. A lot to share with this. Don't want to give away everything, so everyone get out there, register, and you can hear Josh get into more detail. Joshua, looking forward to virtually seeing you next week. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast and sharing what's going on in Robertson County.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, special thanks to Michael Gould and Joshua Hinerman for joining us today on the podcast. Remember, you can visit stnonline.com for more news, stories, and information and how COVID-19 is impacting student transportation. Michael will also be presenting as a keynote speaker at STN EXPO Virtual on January 25th at 8 a.m. Be sure to sign up at stnexpovirtual.com. Thanks to our sponsors, TransFinder and Zonar, who are also big sponsors at STN EXPO Virtual. And make sure you visit them and their teams at the trade show and visit their sessions. They will have lots of great solutions to help support you and your needs. We love you, listeners. Subscribe, stream, and share the podcast. You can hear us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to give us that 5-star review. We love those. We love to hear your comments as well. You can always email us at info@stnmedia.com. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next week.